I've worked with 5-person companies and huge multinational companies. So, yeah, it was a sense of, oh my gosh, this does work. And I can stand in this, that this is actually an expertise that is relevant in a corporate environment, in many different kind of contexts of corporate environments, and also institutional and nonprofit. And, having, as a small company, having to figure out where we focus, but not feeling like I have to take my skill and not be GoodJelly, because I can do that, just bring me in for, a process improvement. But I'm like, look, what the way we do this, the way I am, which you're hiring, is now shaped into a methodology that is repeatable. So let's just bring that to the table too. And that's exciting.
Welcome, Christine. I'm so excited to have you joining us here for our Swagger Spotlight series, where we highlight the stories of real consultants who are out there sealing corporate deals. Before we dive in, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background. Tell us who you are and how you serve organizations.
Thanks, Anniedi, and it's nice to be here with you. So I'm the founder of GoodJelly, and we are all about leading creative work. So we work both with individual artists and writers and musicians to help them lead their creative work differently. And then we also work with organizations around changing the dynamic of how organizations make progress. And so what I observed in my 30 plus years as a process improvement consultant, that what I call the old productivity paradigm, which is really based on, it goes all the way back to assembly line thinking, which is great for a certain part of process work when it's all finished and you're just in repetition mode. But for human creativity and innovation, which a lot of businesses rely on, and of course, as do artists and creative people and entrepreneurs, it's just not designed for it. It creates a mismatch in expectations and doesn't actually work with the way human brains work or with how the creative process works. So that's what we get up to here at GoodJelly.
I love that you shared that, because when I think about your background, it's like you've got the perfect blend of right brain and left brain, right? You have the approach to structure and process, but also the creativity, the innovation side as well. So share with us a little bit about how your prior worlds that you came from prepared you for venturing into corporate consulting on your own as an independent consultant. Would love to hear kind of what were some of the things that helped you, and what were the things that you were like, wow, that was surprising. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I think when I was working in official for companies, I tended to work in small, innovative companies. But even then, I kind of felt like a square peg in a round hole, or whatever that metaphor is. And I think it's because, I grew up dancing and writing, and but I also just really like translating things for people, and communication and teaching. And so when I decided to start off on my own, first I was pursuing writing, and I was balancing doing my own independent consulting, more contracting, and then taking time off to write and work on novels and poetry and dance Argentine tango. And so I think when I had been doing that for, probably close to 20 years, when I came across you in an entrepreneur group, women's entrepreneurs. And I was just really struck by your clarity, and also you seeing the other side. you being on the other side of hiring consultants. And I think when I came out of the corporate world and then kind of went out on my own, I didn't really know how to think. I just was like, okay, I'm getting I'm signing a contract. And I think some of the ahas was our tagline is lead your creative work differently. You helped me think differently about my own company and kind of stand into, wait a second, what actually am I doing here? And what is the value I'm providing? And what are the possibilities? So because most of my career was in consulting, there were aspects of things that you highlight that I was doing without thinking about them. And you were like, no, that's actually a piece of the process. That's value. That differentiates you, that you have that experience. And so really being able to see that and say, oh, there's value in there's value in, at the end of a project, having a debrief. And I always did that, but you really separated, like that is pulling everything together, clarifying the value, making sure we as consultants are showing, hey, here's, especially when you're working with, like sometimes I'm going in and doing mergers and acquisitions or going up and down an organization. So not always working with the CEOs, I'm brought in at that level, but then I kind of go up and down the organization to figure out where the blocks are and where things are getting lost. So to bring all that up and say, here's the big picture, especially for like a leadership team that doesn't have that luxury of going to all those levels. So I think there was always like a lens that you were putting on it that helped me, almost have a little more swagger in what I was doing. And that continues now. Like, we're working on a creativity and innovation governance index that we want to, we're building to be a benchmark for individuals, artists, writers, but also for our organizations that rely on creativity and innovation to measure that and have a benchmark on growth. And I can see how that builds from certification to create, and I would not have seen that before working with you. You have very simple ways to map things out. I mean, you have us play bingo, for goodness sake. And it was like, oh, I have B13. I had more chips on the bingo card than I thought. And then sometimes I pull that out and I'm like, oh, and I can make connections and see different possibilities and partnerships in different ways. So I think for me, it was just like that expansion, especially working with you.
Thank you for sharing that, Christine, because in many ways, having that prior consulting background, you had the muscle memory, right? You knew what it took to deliver at that level of scale when it came to serving clients, right? But now you were stretching new muscles, right? In new ways in terms of how to package up your expertise, how to go out there and find new business, right? It was kind of moving in a new direction. And you mentioned the Argentine tango. I think that tango doesn't have anything on navigating corporate procurement, right? It can feel like sometimes you're doing more than a two-step to figure out how do you, especially with you working with C-suite executives, right, to be able to navigate that playing field. So you brought up bingo. Okay, you joined us for our B2B lead gen time. So let's go there.
Okay.
What was it that made you shift? Because prior to that, you were serving individual creatives, right? And now you were thinking about, right, how do I add more organizations to the mix? What was it that was motivating you to serve more organizations at that time?
Part of it is my definition of creativity is so loose. And I love working with, I'm a writer. I love working with writers. It just delights me when I'm teaching poets process and, it's just delightful to me. But I also just feel so strongly about making things easier for anyone. And that that this mismatch of this standard that has become so prevalent, and it drives the hustle culture and all this stuff, and I'm just like, it doesn't have to be so hard. You can make progress if you empower people. My position is at every level of the organization. Like if I'm working with a fitter in fire protection and they're going into an old building and having to retrofit a building that was in Massachusetts built in the late 1800s to be up to fire code, there's some creative thinking going on from project manager to the people, putting the pipe in and up. And so to me, that pipe fitter has to have governance and leading his work, and then putting, feeding that up to his leaders. So for me, it was to broaden the impact. And I guess for me, on a certain level, I don't see them as very different, because I also perceive a writer who wants a long publishing career, they are the CEO of just a small company. I wanted to go back to something that you said. When I was working in the corporate world, I was so clear I did not feel drawn to like I couldn't see a future for myself, because I couldn't see myself as, I want to be a VP or a CEO of these large corporations. My life always seemed like it was lending more toward, I guess, variation, or, and so I almost, in the corporate world, purposely avoided certain things, like, don't get me in on the sales calls. But then I would come in and let's do it. So there was also a massive gap for me as, a solopreneur, because I wasn't drawn to the progression in that context. Then that just cut me off from certain skills. And I think having, entrepreneurs can get exposed to so much, and you're trying to invest the money. When you're starting out, you're trying to invest your money so wisely, and what I've come to terms with, you're gonna make mistakes, and I had made some. They're gonna feel like mistakes. In the end, you always learn something, and after, let's say, a more costly non-mistake mistake. What the upside of that was that I was so clear that because I had some big holes, I was acting like I was one big hole. And after I came out of that experience, I was like, as you said, there was some muscle memory here, but just complete blank spaces here. And I figured out that you could help me fill the blank spaces. That there was a perfect, you were the puzzle piece I was missing. And that shift for me to make the investment in Swagger School and working with you, it calmed me down, because I had to stop acting in certain it would be frustrating in certain situations, because I got that. Like, why am I spending money on this? And then when I got to you, I'm like, I don't know that, and I don't know that, and that was exciting and actually felt great. Like I was finally acknowledging my own skill and power, and also saying, hey, this is a blank space that I want to work on to be able to serve as many people as possible.
Yes. Yeah. What I'm hearing from you is that you were redefining what it means to be creative in corporate environments, right? That it wasn't just individual, right, executive leaders or researchers who could hire you, or creatives that could hire you, but also those who are creating within organizations, right, could have a need for your services, that there were multiple ways to apply that, those insights that you gained across all those years. And in the same breath, you were rewriting your own narrative, right?
Mhm.
Reclaiming what it means to fail and to succeed, right? In innovation, we always hear fail fast, right? Really go out there and iterate and adapt as the market is evolving. And you were doing that in real time.
Yeah, I also think though I want to part of my work is inviting people to trust their own speed and also to really honor creative safety. So some people it's part of their DNA to like maybe get up and just fail on social media. But if you can honor and say, okay, I'm not necessarily hesitating if, hey, I take 2 days to learn first before getting on. So it's fail fast in a way that keeps you safe. And and I always want to make this distinction that keeping creative safety does not mean playing it safe. That creative safety actually helps you take bigger risks. So firefighters don't run into burning buildings with flip-flops, and they have a lot of protection gear. And it doesn't guarantee full safety. There's always going to be a risk. But I think a lot in creativity and the productivity pushes us that we kind of have to, get a thick skin and get out there. And I'm like, there are so many ways to reach the same end. And if you can keep checking in with yourself as you're moving, you're actually going to get there faster. The route will look different than someone else. And so I think, yeah, and allowing myself the time to do all this thinking was part of what you validated for me. And, we talked about like what I was bringing to the market versus someone else who maybe was bringing like a physical product to the market. And there was a lot of conversations about renewal and making time for the things that amplify the units of you.
I love it. And you talked a little bit about that gear, right, that firefighters put on before going towards the risk. Like, can you share a little bit about the type of gear that you needed to serve bigger organizations and maybe one mindset shift that you experienced as you transitioned from selling to individuals to selling to organizations?
Yeah, I think one thing that came to mind is something that I learned like in my very first corporate job. I was sent into these big banks, and at that time I was a business analyst, so in essence a process improvement consultant, even then. And I just remembered, like as a 24-year-old, thinking, I actually don't know how businesses survive if things are this kludgy. I just had this impression that corporate America was this put together thing. And I think it was just like, hey, I'm bringing something to the table too. A conversation with an accountant friend also helped me because my company's name is GoodJelly, and I wanted a name that immediately when people think about process improvement or governance, they're not thinking, let's smile and have fun. And I wanted a name that immediately caused some cognitive dissonance. But I could find myself shrinking a little bit when I thought pitching to the corporate world, this accountant friend of mine, we were talking and I shared this with him, and he said, Christine, we are a huge, huge, huge accounting firm. And we just hired some company named Green Frog. You just send in your invoices, and they're hiring you because part of your energy is that name. And so it was continuing to just step into the meanness of me, and then having what I would call the operational, filling the hole of some of that that B2B operational stuff, and just having also your again, for me, it's very valuable to talk to someone. I have X number of corporate deal experiences because you were on the other side. You have massively, massively more data points that if I was feeling like, I don't know, that you could level set in a way. And that the practicality of that was very helpful, because then it was like once that little glitch got like like put back into place, then like the muscle memory came. Then it was just, I'm doing my thing. Like once I'm in front of someone, but it's like, oh, and the lawyers and the converse. And I'm just like, I'm just a person. You're just a person. Let's just have this conversation. And I have Anniedi on the side who is going to de-glitch me whenever I need de-glitched. So it was extremely helpful.
Yes, as a former corporate buyer, I always say that these decision makers, they put their pants on one leg at a time, like we all do,
Yes.
right? So now you're in the thick of it, right? You've got your deal under your belt, and you're in delivery mode. Can you just share a little bit about what impact that made on your business, whether you were able to kind of expand your team, or the way in which that you take your thought leadership to the market?
Yeah, it changed everything for me. One, I hit my, I could put me in front of people and get me working. I mean, I'm just like, I'm in my sweet spot, and I'm just delighted. I mean, one of the joys of consulting for me through my whole career was, it's fascinating to me. Insurance, high tech, banking, academia, fire protection. I'm like, bring it on. Like, I'm so amazed at seeing the brilliant variety of just expertise in the world. So that was just great to be in kind of a broader mode kind of interaction. I did hire my first official employee ever during the time, yes. And just having access for you, and feeling very appreciative of even just getting recommendations from, in the community and confident recommendations, not just going on the web and reading something. And then it gave me time to just think, where do I want to take this? And one of the things you always emphasized is how we put ourselves out into the world. If we want to switch something like, okay, I'll just say it here, Pixar, if you need any help, come on over. So like Pixar would be a dream, client for me. I mean, how delightful would that be to work with those folks? But to state these things and to be unapologetic, like, I do find any kind of business fascinating, and it's always delightful when the first time a poet signed up, I was like, I was so delighted to have this crossover of process work to creative work. And, of course, like, there's formal poetry forms. So of course it makes sense. And the creative process is the creative process. So to me, it's like I said earlier, it's not really that different. It's just the scale. But I've worked with 5-person companies and huge multinational companies. So, it was a sense of, oh my gosh, this does work. And I can stand in that this is actually an expertise that is relevant in a corporate environment, in many different kind of contexts of corporate environments, and also institutional and nonprofit. And, having, as a small company, having to figure out where we focus, but being not feeling like I have to take my skill and not be GoodJelly, because I can do that, just bring me in for, a process improvement. But I'm like, look, what the way we do this, the way I am, which you're hiring, is now shaped into a methodology that is repeatable. So let's just bring that to the table too. And that's exciting.
Absolutely. When you came to us, you already had the thought leadership, right? You had a distinctive framework and methodology, the way that you were getting results with your individual clients. And now you expanded the impact that you could have by serving larger organizations. And you did so without really posting that much on social media. So I would love to hear from you kind of now that you're on the other side of the journey, right? You came in to join us for the challenge. You joined our Swagger School Mastermind, then had some of that one-on-one thought partnership inside our VIP experience. What were some of the biggest takeaways that you had from that experience of serving organizations that you feel have changed the way that you think about your business?
I think one of the biggest changes that was seeded in working with you was this evolution of my own thinking. And for the longest time, I kept defining what I was doing as just like a nicer, kinder form of productivity, which, okay, that sounds kind of kumbaya, even though I'm getting these measurable, like, just results that are operational and sustainable, and the behaviors are changing and output is increasing. And it was in the thinking and having the spaciousness to do that, and the inflow from, which just is a different kind of scale of work with B2B versus necessarily individual, smaller B2C, like mini B2B, micro B2Bs. And so there was an evolution of my own thinking of, wait a second. I mean, how can I keep saying I'm a productivity person when half the time or more I'm telling people to slow down? And it occurred to me what I'm doing is actually, this is about leadership of creative work and governance. And so that shift was huge. And in thinking about, you mentioned that I wasn't always on social media. This was a very fraught sticking point for me. And especially someone like me who is like well trained in how to make work move. Like, I mean, I can get all I know how to unblock people. I know how to unblock myself, and I still was not doing it. And I was studying with Laurel Portier, who is she's brilliant. I totally believe in her approach. It aligns with GoodJelly's philosophy. And I studied with her for 3 years, and her messaging is, with my approach, the worst thing you can do is stop and start. And that is what I was doing. And so having to manage my mindset through that. But once I got this shift to leadership, now her engine, I'm in full process of running it. And I had on a call, I mentioned to her that I was now aware of why I had stopped and started, because I intuitively knew, even though I couldn't articulate it for 3 years, that I was unwilling to amplify a message that was not mine. And you had emphasized things like that. Like, even if we can't articulate, we have to trust, which that's part of my approach too, in embodied stewardship. We have to trust what is happening here as we are the leaders of ourself first, before we can do any work out in the world. And that's hard when you can see yourself stopping from doing something that in your head you want yourself to do, and you're perfectly capable of. The productivity says, just go do it, get over it, buckle down. And you were like, pay attention. And this is my route may have been different, but, now all the KPIs are hitting. We're being able to communicate to the right people. It's very exciting. And
Absolutely. It was an identity shift, one, going from, being the productivity box, right, to now telling a bigger story around the impact and role that you're playing in leadership. But then also the embodiment piece. We talk about leveling up your mindset, embodying your goals, rocking your unique swagger. And so the embodiment piece is where I saw you take off.
yes,
Because I think, one of the hypotheses I have about why consultants don't put themselves out there more or do more outreach with organizations is this idea that sales doesn't feel like them. If it feels too salesy, if it feels inauthentic, they're less likely to do it, which is why we have the bingo card, right? Like,
yes,
so it's like when it feels fun, when it feels creative, when it feels uplifting, then yes, you're going to do want to do more of it, right? So it's
yeah.
about not finding the way, it's about finding your way. And seeing you really root into and embody and own your path has been really exciting to watch.
Thank you. And I think when I think about that, I mean, it just occurred to me, I feel in this past few year arc, I had a trifecta of deglitchers. I had you, I had Laurel Portier, and I had Simon Bowen of Models Method. And each of you were helping me with a very, very specific thing. And what was consistent across all of you was the non ickiness of sales, that you really stand in that. And what was most important about you was you kept helping me do that in context specifically of the B2B work, in the on the ground conversations I was having. I could say, oh, okay, we could, almost role play. Like this was said, this is what and just again, it was that sense of having someone who had been there before on the other side to be on the receiving end of letting me practice. Because I think, when you're in these situations, and especially B2B, if you're going into a company like, I'm a company of two, and they're a company of 20,000 to, 100,000. And it's very easy to feel. But then I thought, I don't want to work with a company who tries to, bully a little company. And I don't. I work with great companies who, where they see the value I'm bringing. I'm delighted to get to experience their expertise and their culture. And it's truly a partnership, though I'm a company of two and they're a company of, hugeness. And I think just trusting that, and again, having you to kind of say, get back into your CEO, they're a CEO, and just hold that elegantly, then all the muscle memory comes back. Then I'm just having a conversation with a person, which that's all I did and do all day. I'm as a business analyst and a process improvement consultant and a coach for creative work. I'm listening to where their block is, where their concern is. And that's what a negotiation is, like, what are we bringing to the table? Is this going to work or not? And so, yeah, but that was huge, 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 huge to have. And also knowing that I could put contracts in front of you and you would say, playing small here, level up there. The whole idea of certification or this benchmark we're creating. Those are things that came out of my own thinking from the bingo card. So yeah, huge. Anniedi.
So many aha moments. So imagine that you are sitting across from the table of a consultant who's where you were a year or two ago, right? Getting started on their journey, maybe wondering, is corporate consulting really for me? What is an inspiring word or encouraging word that you would share with them to continue along their path?
So one, I think I would just sit with them for a moment and say, if it's feeling hard, it is hard. so so good on you for being here and being in, still swinging. I would just start by acknowledging they're doing something bold. It is a less easy path than getting a job. It just is. And then we'll say, go work with Anniedi. And then I would say, but I would also say, keep keep standing in you, keep embracing you, and keep getting. You have to listen to yourself, but also get calm, trustworthy. Like I said, you were part of my trifecta. That is what I needed. Your particular expertise, Simon's particular expertise, Laurel's particular expertise. But wherever the expertise is, that alignment of values is also important. And so that's what it was. I just, for me, part of my approach is grounded power, and so I'm not going to destabilize and take away someone's power in the sales process. I just won't. And so that I was able to find people that stood for that. And you have to trust when something just doesn't feel right, because if it doesn't feel right, you're the one that has to go to bed, go to sleep at night, and what you're writing in your journal. And another thing you always said is that I think is really true is, if you keep seeding what you don't want to grow, you're going to have a whole field that you don't want the harvest from, really. Like, maybe you'll get monetary harvest, but it's not the full life harvest that you want. And so there are going to be moments where you have to make calls, and in the sense of balancing things out. But it's also, I just keep returning to, we teach embodied stewardship last, because, we start with operational governance, because I just want people to feel easier flow. Then we go to grounded power. So I think it's, standing in your own authority and listening to yourself, because that is going to allow you to make the steps and take the aligned actions that are going to get you the harvest that you actually want, on both a kind of monetary level, but also the impact you want to make in the world, and what you want to have, but not just materially, like pride in what you're doing and delight that you made the difference that you wanted to make. I guess that's it.
I mean, Christine, you've just given them the playbook, right? For how to design a path that brings you that joy, that kind of good jelly vibe, right? Even in situations where you're facing massive uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
We've watched you evolve in a market that is not perfect conditions, right? Dealing with, tough losses and figuring out, right, how do you stand up for yourself in tough negotiations? Like, it's just been a joy to watch you
Thank you.
demonstrating that grounded power that you speak of. Tell
Thank
us
you.
how people can keep up with you and follow all the wonderful work that you're doing.
So you can always find us at www.goodjelly.com. And then we're on Instagram at League of Good Jelly. But basically, if you go to www.goodjelly.com, all our socials are at the bottom of the page. You can get on our newsletter. I send out a weekly newsletter that is a reflection on leadership and creative work. And yeah, just, you know, come into our world and let's just, you know, be delighted and be in good jelly energy. And we'll be happy to support you however we can.
Thank you for inspiring others, whether they be writers, authors, former consultants, right, who are
Yeah.
wondering, can I really do this on my own? Seasoned professionals who are saying, how do I take the wisdom, right, that I have held over all these decades, right, and now turn that into packages that can really transform the landscape within these organizations. So we thank you so much for sharing your inspiring
Yes.
story. We are wishing you continued success on behalf of our entire team here at Swagger School.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing where the corporate consulting journey takes you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Anniedi.
Thank you.